The encounter. The dense forest stretched endlessly before Ethan, the human explorer. His spaceship lay in ruins behind him, smoke rising into the alien sky. He wiped the sweat off his brow, squinting at the twin suns overhead. It had been hours since the crash, and he had no idea where he was or what kind of creatures lived on this strange planet. His priority was survival, but deep inside, curiosity pulled at him. The air smelled different here, a mix of wildflowers and something metallic. The forest was alive with the chirps and hums of alien creatures. Suddenly, Ethan heard a rustling sound in the bushes. His heart pounded as he reached for his makeshift weapon, a metal rod salvaged from his ship. Slowly, he approached the noise, ready to defend himself. To his surprise, a small, squirrel-like creature hopped out. Its fur shimmered like liquid silver, and its large eyes stared at him curiously. Ethan let out a relieved laugh. "Not so scary, huh?" he muttered, lowering the rod. The creature tilted its head, almost as if it understood him, before scurrying away. Ethan continued walking, determined to find water and shelter before nightfall. As the hours passed, he noticed the forest beginning to change. The trees grew taller, their bark glowing faintly in the dimming light. Strange flowers with petals like crystal refracted the sun's rays, creating a mesmerizing display. Then, just as he thought he might have to spend the night under the open sky, he saw it, a village. The houses were built into the trees, their architecture blending seamlessly with the natural surroundings. Lights flickered warmly from within, and the hum of distant voices reached his ears. Ethan hesitated. Should he approach? What if the inhabitants were hostile? But his exhaustion won over his fear. He needed help, and this was his only chance. As he stepped into the village, the voices quieted. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. The villagers were humanoid, but their skin had a pale, iridescent sheen, and their eyes glowed faintly in the twilight. They whispered among themselves in a language Ethan couldn't understand. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," Ethan said, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. He tried to appear non-threatening, though his heart raced. One of the villagers, an elderly woman draped in intricate robes, stepped forward. Her presence commanded respect, and the crowd parted for her as she approached. Her silver hair was braided with glowing beads, and her gaze was piercing yet kind. "Who are you, traveler?" she asked in perfect, albeit accented, English. Ethan blinked in surprise. "You speak my language." The woman smiled faintly. "We are not unfamiliar with your kind. I am Matriarch Villara, the elder of this village." "And you are?" "Ethan," he replied, still wary. "My ship crashed nearby. I don't mean to intrude, I just need some help to survive." Villara studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Come, you look hungry." She gestured for him to follow her, and Ethan felt the villagers' eyes on him as he walked through the village. Despite their curious stares, the place felt peaceful. Children played near the glowing trees, and the scent of something sweet wafted through the air. Villara led Ethan to a large wooden table outside a circular building. A bowl of steaming broth was placed before him, along with a loaf of bread-like food. Ethan hesitated, wondering if the food was safe, but his growling stomach made the decision for him. As he ate, Villara sat across from him, observing silently. When he finished, she spoke again. "You are the first human to set foot here in many generations, Ethan. It is no coincidence you arrived." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "My ship crashed. It was an accident." "Perhaps to you," Villara said, her tone cryptic. "But we Eldari believe there is no such thing as coincidence. You were brought here for a reason." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I don't know what you're talking about. I just need to repair my ship and get home." Villara leaned closer, her gaze intensifying. "What if I told you there is more at stake than your ship, Ethan? More than your life?" Before he could respond, a younger woman appeared. She was stunning, with features more delicate than the others and eyes that seemed to hold galaxies within them. She glanced at Ethan, then quickly looked away. "Lyra," Vilara said gently, "Meet Ethan. He may be the answer we've been seeking." Ethan blinked, confused. "Answer? What answer?" Vilara's expression softened, but her words carried weight. "Ethan, I have a request. One that may seem unusual to you, but it is of great importance to us." Ethan's unease grew. "What kind of request?" Vilara smiled faintly, her eyes glinting with a mix of hope and determination. "Marry my granddaughter." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Ethan's jaw dropped, his mind racing. Was she serious? What kind of culture had he stumbled into? I don't understand," he stammered, his voice shaky. "You will," Vilara said calmly. "In time, you will understand everything." And with that, the encounter that would change Ethan's life forever truly began. The proposal. Ethan sat at the wooden table, staring at matriarch Vilara in stunned silence. The words she had spoken echoed in his mind. "Marry my granddaughter." He glanced at Lyra, who stood quietly beside her grandmother. Her iridescent skin caught the soft glow of the village lights, and her eyes, a swirling mix of blues and silvers, were cast downward. She looked as uncomfortable as he felt. This must be some kind of misunderstanding," Ethan said finally, his voice a mix of disbelief and nervous laughter. Vilara shook her head, her expression calm but resolute. "It is no misunderstanding, Ethan. Your arrival is no accident. You are here because fate has brought you to us. You are the one we have been waiting for." Wait, Ethan interrupted, raising his hands. "I just crashed here. I'm not some chosen hero or anything like that. I'm just a guy trying to fix his ship and get back home. Marriage. I don't even know what to say to that." Vilara leaned forward, her gaze sharp but not unkind. "You may not see it yet, but your arrival was foretold. Our people have long awaited the arrival of an outsider. You are not the first human to come here, Ethan, though it has been many generations since the last. And each time, the outsider brought change. Sometimes salvation, sometimes ruin. You are the next piece of this cycle." Ethan frowned, confusion and frustration building within him. "Okay, let's say I believe this prophecy of yours. Why marriage? Why me and her?" He gestured toward Lyra, who shifted uncomfortably. Vilara sighed deeply, her hands clasped together on the table. "Our people, the Eldari, are blessed with longevity and wisdom, but it comes at a cost. Over time, our lineage has grown weaker. Our connection to the life force of this planet, to its energy, is fading. The union of an Eldari and an outsider has, in the past, restored that balance. You, Ethan, are the only outsider to arrive in generations. You are the key to preserving our future." Ethan's head spun. He wanted to argue, to call her crazy, but something about her words carried a strange weight, as though she truly believed every syllable. "And what about her?" Ethan asked, nodding toward Lyra. "What does she have to say about this?" Lyra finally looked up, her glowing eyes meeting his for the first time. There was a sadness in them, a hesitation that made Ethan's chest tighten. "I will do what is necessary for my people," she said softly, her voice melodic yet burdened. "But this is not what I would choose for myself." Her words surprised him. Ethan had expected her to be eager to follow her grandmother's plan, but it was clear she wasn't. "See, she doesn't even want this," Ethan said, turning back to Vilara. "So why force it?" "It is not force," Vilara said firmly. "It is duty. Lyra understands what is at stake. Our survival depends on this union." Ethan shook his head, pushing back his chair and standing. "I'm sorry, but this is insane. I can't just marry someone I've never met because of some prophecy. I'll find another way to help your people, but this... No." Vilara's expression darkened slightly, though her tone remained calm. "You are free to refuse, Ethan. We are not monsters. But know this. If you leave, you will not find your way back to your ship. The forest will not let you." And the longer you remain without making a decision, the greater the risk to Lyra and to us all. Ethan's jaw tightened. Is that a threat? A warning, Villara corrected. The forest protects us, but it does not trust outsiders. It has allowed you to come this far because you may be the answer we seek. But should you reject your purpose, it will not be kind. Ethan's mind raced. He didn't believe in prophecies or magical forests, but he couldn't deny that this place was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. And there was Lyra, standing silently, her sadness palpable. She didn't want this any more than he did, but she was willing to sacrifice her freedom for her people. Could he walk away and leave her to face that burden alone? Give me time, Ethan said finally, his voice steady but strained. I need to think about this. Villara nodded, her expression unreadable. You have until the next full moon to decide. That is when the trials will begin. Trials? Ethan asked, his stomach sinking. The 3 trials will determine your worthiness, Villara explained. If you pass, you will become one of us. If you fail, well, no outsider has ever failed and lived to tell the tale. Ethan stared at her, a chill running down his spine. You're really not making this any easier. Villara's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. Life rarely is. As Ethan followed a silent Lyra to a small hut where he'd be staying, his thoughts churned. He didn't trust Villara or her so-called prophecy, but he couldn't deny that he felt something strange about this place, something almost alive. And then there was Lyra. Her sadness, her quiet strength. It pulled at him in a way he couldn't explain. As he lay on the simple bed, staring up at the wooden ceiling, one thought consumed him. What had he gotten himself into? The test. Ethan awoke to the sound of a low hum reverberating through the village. The morning light filtered through the glowing leaves, casting eerie patterns on the wooden walls of his small hut. His mind still swirled with the events of the previous day. The crash, the village, the strange proposal, and the cryptic mention of trials. As he stepped outside, the villagers were already gathered in a circle at the center of the village. Their faces were solemn, their eyes fixed on matriarch Villara, who stood in the middle, her staff glowing faintly. Beside her was Lyra, her expression unreadable. Ethan took a deep breath and approached the circle, the crowd parting to let him through. He could feel their gazes on him, some filled with hope, others with suspicion. Today begins the first trial, Villara announced, her voice carrying a weight that made Ethan's chest tighten. Ethan, you have chosen to stay and consider our request. Now you must prove your worthiness to join our people. Ethan frowned. You still haven't told me what these trials are about. What am I supposed to do? Villara turned to him, her eyes steady. Each trial will test a different aspect of your character, your strength, your mind, and your heart. The first trial is a test of endurance. You must traverse the forest of whispers and retrieve the crystal bloom. The what? Ethan asked, his confusion mounting. Villara raised her staff, and a holographic image of a glowing flower-like object appeared. Its petals shimmered with an otherworldly light. The crystal bloom grows deep within the forest, guarded by the spirits of the land. It will not come to you willingly. You must earn it. Ethan glanced at Lyra, hoping for some sort of explanation, but she only looked away. What happens if I fail? He asked, his voice low. Villara's expression grew grave. The forest is unforgiving. Many have entered seeking the bloom and never returned. But failure is not an option if you wish to remain here. Ethan swallowed hard. Great. No pressure. The villagers stepped aside as Villara gestured toward a narrow path leading into the forest. Ethan took a deep breath, steeling himself. All right, he muttered. Let's get this over with. The forest of whispers was nothing like the peaceful village. The trees here were taller, their bark a deep black that seemed to absorb the light. Strange, glowing orbs floated through the air, whispering unintelligible words that sent chills down Ethan's spine. Every step felt like a challenge. The ground was uneven, covered in roots that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. The air grew colder the deeper he went, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Focus," he told himself. "It's just a forest. Just trees, and glowing orbs and creepy voices. No big deal." He pressed on, his heart pounding. As he walked, he noticed the forest seemed to react to him. Branches moved as if reaching for him, and the glowing orbs darted closer, their whispers becoming more distinct. "Turn back," one voice hissed. "You don't belong here," another murmured. Ethan gritted his teeth. "Nice try, but I'm not quitting." Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the shadows. Ethan froze, gripping a stick he had picked up earlier. The figure was humanoid but translucent, its body shimmering like water. Its eyes glowed, fixed on him. "You seek the crystal bloom," it said, its voice echoing unnaturally. "Yeah," Ethan replied cautiously. "I don't suppose you'd just let me have it, would you?" The figure tilted its head, almost amused. "To take the bloom, you must prove your endurance. The forest will test you. If you falter, you will remain here forever." "Of course," Ethan muttered. "Why can't anything be simple?" The figure stepped aside, and the path before him began to shift, the trees forming a twisting maze. Ethan had no choice but to move forward. The maze was relentless. Every turn seemed to lead him back to where he started, and the whispers grew louder, filling his mind with doubt. "You're not strong enough. You will fail, like the others." Ethan shook his head, trying to block out the voices. "Shut up," he muttered. "I didn't survive a crash just to give up now." Hours seemed to pass as he navigated the maze, his body growing weaker with each step. Just when he thought he couldn't go any further, he saw it, a faint glow in the distance. The crystal bloom. Ethan pushed himself forward, his legs trembling. As he reached the bloom, the whispers turned into a deafening roar, and the translucent figure appeared again. "One final test," it said. "The bloom will resist you. You must hold on, no matter what." Ethan reached for the bloom, and as soon as his fingers touched it, a searing pain shot through his body. He screamed, but he didn't let go. The bloom pulsed with energy, trying to force him away, but he gritted his teeth and held on. "I'm not letting go," he growled, his muscles burning. Finally, the bloom stopped resisting, its glow softening. Ethan fell to his knees, clutching it tightly. The whispers faded, replaced by a calming silence. "You have passed the first trial," the figure said, its voice softer now. "But the forest is only the beginning." Ethan stumbled back to the village, exhausted but victorious. The villagers greeted him with awe and whispers, but Vilara simply nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "You have proven your strength, Ethan," she said, "but strength alone will not see you through the trials to come." Ethan glanced at Lyra, who looked at him with a mix of relief and something else he couldn't quite place. "Great," he muttered. "Can't wait to see what's next." Little did he know, the true challenges were yet to come. The secret revealed. Ethan sat by the fire that evening, the crystal bloom resting in his lap. Its soft glow pulsed in time with his heartbeat, as if it had become a part of him. The villagers watched him from a distance, their whispers carrying a mix of awe and apprehension. The first trial was over, but its toll on Ethan was clear. His muscles ached, his mind buzzed with exhaustion, and his confidence teetered under the weight of what lay ahead. Across the fire, Lyra sat silently, her eyes fixed on the flames. Ethan studied her for a moment, wondering what thoughts hid behind her distant gaze. She seemed trapped, not just by her grandmother's expectations, but by something deeper. "Do you know why your grandmother's doing this?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. Lyra looked up, startled. "Doing what?" "These trials. This whole prophecy thing. What's the real reason she wants us to marry?" Lyra hesitated, her fingers twisting a small, glowing pendant around her neck. "It's not just about the prophecy," she said softly. "It's about control." Ethan leaned forward, Control. What do you mean? She glanced around, ensuring no one was close enough to overhear. Then, lowering her voice, she said, "Our people's connection to this planet is fading, just like my grandmother told you. But what she didn't tell you is that it's her fault. She's been using the energy of the forest to extend her own life, draining the land and weakening our bond to it." Ethan's eyes widened. "Wait, are you saying she's the reason your people are in danger?" Lyra nodded, her expression grim. "The elders know, but they're too afraid to challenge her. She's powerful, Ethan, more powerful than you realize. And she thinks that by binding an outsider to our people, she can channel the energy she's stolen into a new source. Into you." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "So, this isn't about saving your people. It's about her staying in control." Lyra nodded. "And if you go through with these trials and accept the marriage, you'll be bound to her will, just like the others before you." "The others?" Ethan asked, his voice rising. Lyra's gaze darkened. "You're not the first outsider to come here, Ethan. There were others, travelers, explorers. They were put through the trials too, but none of them survived long after. The energy transfer, it changes you. It takes something from you." Ethan clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. "Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" Lyra's voice trembled. "Because I was scared. Scared of her. Scared of what might happen to me if I tried to stop her." Ethan stood, pacing by the fire. "This is insane. She's using me as some kind of battery. I can't let this happen." Lyra grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "You can't leave, Ethan. The forest won't let you. And even if you could escape, she'd send the spirits after you. You have to finish the trials. But this time, we'll do it on our terms." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" Lyra's eyes burned with a determination he hadn't seen before. "There's a way to break her hold over the village. The trials are tied to an ancient artifact, an object buried deep beneath the village. It's the source of her power and the key to freeing us. If we destroy it, we can end this." Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. "You're asking me to destroy the thing that's keeping your people alive." Lyra shook her head. "It's not keeping us alive. It's keeping her alive. Once it's gone, our connection to the planet will begin to heal. We'll finally be free." Ethan hesitated. The weight of her words pressed on him. He had come here as an outsider, desperate to survive and return home. Now he was being asked to save an entire people from their own leader. "All right," he said finally, "but how do we find this artifact?" Lyra's lips curved into a small, hopeful smile. "It's hidden beneath the temple at the edge of the village, but we'll need to pass the second trial to get the key that unlocks it." Ethan groaned. "Of course. Another trial." Lyra stood, her confidence growing. "This one isn't just a test of strength, it's a test of the mind. You'll be challenged to outthink the forest itself. But don't worry, I'll help you. We'll get through this together." Ethan looked at her, his resolve hardening. "All right, let's do it. But if we're going to take down your grandmother, we'll need a plan." Lyra nodded, her eyes glinting with determination. "Then let's start planning. We don't have much time." As the fire crackled between them, Ethan and Lyra forged a fragile alliance, their shared goal binding them together. The trials ahead were daunting, and the secrets they sought to uncover could cost them everything. But for the first time since he crashed on this strange planet, Ethan felt a spark of hope. Little did he know, the second trial would not only test his intelligence, but also force him to confront truths about himself and about Lyra that would change everything. The betrayal. The village buzzed with activity as the second trial drew near. Ethan, now more aware of the Eldari's distrustful gazes, felt like a lamb being led to slaughter. Each whispered conversation, each sidelong glance, only deepened his unease. He had made a pact with Lyra, but he couldn't shake the feeling that even she wasn't telling him everything. The second trial was to take place in the Sanctuary of Echoes, an ancient cavern beneath the village where the Eldari said the forest's wisdom resided. It was a place where truth and deception blended, where reality bent to test the mind. Vilara had explained the trial as a way to prove Ethan's ability to think beyond his human instincts, to trust in the Eldari way. But Ethan now knew better than to take her words at face value. The entrance to the sanctuary loomed ahead, carved into the side of a massive, glowing tree that seemed older than time itself. Its bark shimmered with faint symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. Vilara stood before the entrance, her staff glowing faintly as she addressed Ethan. "This trial will test your mind and your resolve," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "Inside, you will face illusions, puzzles, and temptations. If you succeed, you will emerge stronger, one step closer to proving your worth. If you fail—" Her pause was deliberate, and the meaning was clear. Ethan nodded, feigning confidence. "Yeah, I get it. No pressure." Vilara smiled faintly, but her eyes betrayed no warmth. She raised her staff, and the cavern's entrance opened, revealing a swirling mist of light and shadow. "Go," she said simply. Ethan hesitated, glancing back at Lyra. She stood at the edge of the gathering, her expression unreadable. He had hoped for a reassuring nod, a sign that she was still on his side, but she offered none. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the sanctuary. The air inside was thick, almost suffocating, and the ground beneath Ethan's feet shifted with each step. The walls of the cavern shimmered like liquid glass, reflecting distorted images of himself and the village. Whispers surrounded him, faint and indistinct, yet unnervingly familiar. "Why are you here?" one voice asked, soft yet accusatory. "To survive," Ethan muttered, shaking his head. "Just focus." The first challenge appeared as a set of glowing symbols etched into a stone pedestal. They shifted and rearranged themselves, forming a puzzle that seemed to taunt him. "Match the pattern," a voice echoed in his mind. Ethan crouched, studying the symbols. They reminded him of constellations, and he quickly realized they could be connected to form a specific shape. But as he moved the pieces, the whispers grew louder, more urgent. "You're not good enough. You'll fail, just like the others. She's using you." Ethan gritted his teeth. "Shut up," he growled, forcing himself to focus. After what felt like hours, he completed the puzzle. The symbols glowed brightly before vanishing, and the pedestal sank into the ground. "All right," he muttered, standing, one down. But as he moved forward, the cavern shifted again, the walls rippling like water. A new scene unfolded before him, the village, but not as he had seen it. The glowing trees were dark, the houses crumbled, and the villagers lay scattered, lifeless. In the center stood Vilara, her staff pulsing with dark energy. "This is your future," a voice whispered. "This is what she's hiding from you." Ethan stepped closer, heart pounding. The illusion was so vivid, so real, that he could almost feel the heat of the destruction. Vilara's figure turned to face him, her eyes glowing with malice. "You will fail," the illusion said, its voice echoing. "You are nothing but a pawn in my game." Ethan clenched his fists. "This isn't real. It's just another trick." But as he moved to step away, another figure appeared, Lyra. She stood amidst the destruction, tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, why didn't you save us?" she cried. His resolve wavered. The pain in her voice felt so real, so raw, that he almost believed it. I'm trying," he stammered. "I'm doing everything I can." "Are you?" the illusion challenged. "Or are you just running from the truth?" The cavern shifted again, and Ethan found himself back in the mist-filled space, gasping for breath. The final challenge came in the form of a doorway, but it was guarded by a figure Ethan recognized all too well. Himself. The doppelganger smirk, crossing its arms as it blocked his path. "You're wasting your time," it said, its voice dripping with disdain. "You think you can outsmart Vilara. She's been playing this game for centuries. You're nothing but a temporary distraction." Ethan stepped forward. "Get out of my way." The figure laughed. "Or what? You'll fight me? You're not strong enough. You don't even trust Lyra, do you? She's hiding things from you, just like the rest of them." Ethan froze. The words struck a nerve. Did he trust Lyra? Or was she just another piece in Vilara's game? "No," he said finally, his voice steady. "I trust her. And I'm not doing this for Vilara. I'm doing it for her people. For her." The doppelganger's smirk faded, its form shimmering before vanishing entirely. The doorway opened. Ethan emerged from the sanctuary to a stunned crowd. Vilara's expression was unreadable, but Ethan thought he saw a flicker of frustration in her eyes. "You have passed the second trial," she said. "You are stronger than I anticipated." Ethan didn't respond. His gaze found Lyra, who gave him the faintest nod. But as he stood among the villagers, he couldn't shake the feeling that the sanctuary had shown him more than just illusions. It had shown him the truth, and the lies waiting to trap him in their web. The trials were far from over, and Ethan knew the hardest part was yet to come. The escape plan. The village was quiet that night, the kind of eerie silence that made every creak of wood and rustle of leaves sound like a warning. Ethan sat on the floor of his hut, the soft glow of the crystal bloom casting faint patterns on the walls. He turned the strange flower in his hands, its energy pulsing faintly in his palm. 2 trials down, 1 to go. But he wasn't waiting for the third trial to come to him. He was done playing Vilara's game. A soft knock on the wooden frame of his door startled him. He tensed, clutching the crystal bloom tightly. "Who is it?" he whispered. "It's me," Lyra's voice replied, barely audible. He opened the door just enough to let her slip inside, her glowing eyes darting nervously. She carried a small satchel slung over her shoulder, and her expression was grave. "Did anyone see you?" Ethan asked, shutting the door behind her. "No," she said, her voice low. "But we don't have much time. If my grandmother suspects what we're planning, she'll do more than suspect if we sit here whispering all night." Ethan cut in. "What's the plan?" Lyra knelt beside him, pulling out a worn piece of parchment from her satchel. It was covered in intricate symbols and a rough map of the village and surrounding forest. She pointed to a mark near the edge of the map, far from the main village. "The artifact," she said, tapping the mark. "It's here, buried beneath the temple ruins. It's protected by an ancient seal, one that can only be unlocked with the crystal bloom and the key my grandmother carries." Ethan frowned. "So we have half of what we need." Lyra nodded. "Yes, but the key is always with her. There's no way to take it without her noticing." "Then we make her give it to us," Ethan said, his mind already racing. Lyra blinked, surprised. "What are you suggesting?" He leaned forward, his voice firm. "We let her think we're playing along. I'll go through with the third trial, make her believe I'm fully committed to this whole prophecy thing. When she lowers her guard, we take the key and head to the temple." Lyra hesitated, her fingers twisting the glowing pendant around her neck. "It's risky. If she suspects anything." "She won't," Ethan interrupted. "She's too convinced she's in control. We just have to stay one step ahead." Lyra sighed, her gaze dropping to the map. "All right, but once we have the key, we need to move fast. The artifact is heavily guarded by the forest spirits. They'll sense what we're trying to do." Ethan smirked. "Great, because nothing about this has been easy so far." Lyra shot him a faint smile, the first he'd seen since they'd met. "Then we'd better get some rest. Tomorrow will be intense." The next day, the village gathered at the base of a towering cliff where the third trial would take place. Vilara stood at the forefront, her staff glowing faintly as she addressed the crowd. "The final trial is upon us," she announced, her voice carrying over the murmurs of the villagers. "Ethan, you have proven your strength and your mind. Now we test your heart. Step forward." Ethan approached, his jaw set. He glanced at Lyra, who stood at the edge of the gathering. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of worry. Vilara gestured to the cliff. A narrow path wound its way to the top, where a stone platform jutted out over the abyss. At the platform's center was a small pedestal holding a glowing orb. To complete this trial, Vilara said, you must ascend the cliff and retrieve the orb of unity. The climb will test not only your courage but your resolve to protect what you value most. Ethan nodded, stepping toward the path. As he began the climb, the villagers fell silent, their eyes fixed on him. The ascent was grueling. The path was narrow and crumbling in places, forcing Ethan to cling to the rock face to avoid falling. The wind howled around him, carrying whispers similar to those he'd heard in the sanctuary. Turn back. You are not one of them. Why do you fight for their survival? He ignored the voices, focusing on each step. When he finally reached the platform, he approached the pedestal cautiously. The orb pulsed with light, and as he reached for it, the ground beneath him trembled. The air shimmered, and a figure appeared before him, a perfect replica of Lyra. Do you trust her? The illusion asked, its voice echoing. Ethan froze. What kind of question is that? The illusion smiled faintly. You know she's hiding something from you. She hasn't told you everything about the artifact, or the cost of destroying it. Do you truly believe she's on your side? Ethan clenched his fists. You're just another trick. Get out of my way. The illusion stepped aside, its smile fading. If you choose wrong, you won't just destroy your future, you'll destroy your own. Ignoring the words, Ethan grabbed the orb and began his descent. When he returned to the base of the cliff, Vilara's expression was one of triumph. You have completed the final trial, she said. The time has come for you to embrace your destiny. Ethan forced a smile, nodding as the villagers cheered. But as Vilara handed him the ceremonial robes for the upcoming union, his mind was focused on the next step of the plan. Later that night, under the cover of darkness, he and Lyra slipped out of the village. The key now in their possession, they made their way to the temple ruins. The forest seemed alive, the trees whispering warnings as they approached the entrance. Ethan gripped the crystal bloom tightly, its glow cutting through the shadows. This is it, Lyra said, her voice trembling. Once we go inside, there's no turning back. Ethan looked at her, his resolve unwavering. Let's finish this. As they stepped into the temple, the air grew heavy with ancient energy. The artifact awaited them, and with it, the final confrontation that would decide the fate of the Eldari and their own lives. The final choice. The temple was unlike anything Ethan had seen before. It wasn't just ancient, it felt alive. The walls glimmered with veins of pulsing energy, and the air was thick with a hum that resonated deep in his chest. At the center of the chamber, suspended above a pedestal of obsidian, was the artifact. The artifact was a swirling orb of light and shadow, constantly shifting as if caught in a battle with itself. Its presence was overwhelming, radiating both power and danger. Ethan hesitated, gripping the crystal bloom tightly. Beside him, Lyra stared at the artifact, her expression a mix of fear and determination. This is it, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum. It's over, Ethan said firmly. Lyra stepped beside him, her voice steady. Our people are free now, grandmother. It's time to let go. Vilara's defiance faltered, and she crumbled to her knees. In the days that followed, the village began to heal. The forest's energy stabilized, and the connection between the Eldari and their land began to rebuild. Ethan, now a part of this world, found a new purpose. He was no longer a man trying to survive. He was a guardian, a bridge between the Eldari and their planet. As he stood beneath the glowing trees one evening, Lyra approached, her expression soft. You didn't have to do it, she said. Yes, I did, Ethan replied, his voice calm. Some things are worth fighting for. For the first time, in what felt like an eternity, he felt at peace. Ethan glanced at her. You're sure destroying this thing will break Vilara's hold over your people? Lyra nodded slowly. It's the source of her power. Without it, she can't drain the planet's energy anymore. Our connection to the land will start to heal. And the risks? Ethan pressed. Lyra hesitated. The artifact is tied to the forest and to our people. Destroying it could disrupt the balance. There's a chance it could hurt the village. But if we don't do this, she'll keep taking and taking until there's nothing left. Ethan exhaled sharply. The weight of the decision pressed on him like never before. As they approached the artifact, the hum grew louder, and the air became almost electric. Ethan reached out to place the crystal bloom on the pedestal, but the moment he did, a shockwave rippled through the chamber. A voice echoed, deep and resonant. Who dares to disturb the balance? The shadows around the artifact coalesced into a figure, a towering, translucent being with glowing eyes. Its form was humanoid but otherworldly, its presence both terrifying and awe-inspiring. I'm here to stop this, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. Villar has been using this thing to drain your planet. It has to end. The figure tilted its head, as if considering his words. The artifact binds this world. Its destruction will bring chaos. Are you prepared to bear that burden? Ethan glanced at Lyra. Her eyes were locked on the figure, her hands trembling. We don't have a choice, she said firmly. My grandmother has turned this power into a weapon. It's killing our people. The figure's gaze shifted to her. And you, child of the Eldari, would sacrifice your people for freedom. Do you truly understand what you are asking? Lyra stepped forward, her voice breaking. I've seen what my grandmother's done. She's destroyed everything sacred about our connection to this planet. If we don't stop her, there won't be anything left to save. The figure was silent for a moment, then turned its glowing eyes back to Ethan. Very well. The choice is yours, outsider. But know this, once the artifact is destroyed, your life will no longer be your own. The energy you release will bind itself to you, marking you forever as part of this world. Ethan's breath caught. Bind to me. What does that mean? It means you will never return to your old life, the figure said. You will become a part of the forest, its guardian and its servant. This is the price of balance. Ethan's mind raced. He thought of his crash, of his desperate desire to survive and return to Earth. But then he looked at Lyra, at the hope and fear in her eyes. He thought of the villagers, of their quiet desperation under Villar's rule. I didn't ask for this, he muttered. No one ever does, the figure replied. Ethan tightened his grip on the crystal bloom. What happens if I walk away? The figure's expression darkened. The artifact will remain. Villar's power will grow unchecked, and this world will wither. Your presence here will have been for nothing. Lyra stepped closer to Ethan, her voice trembling. You don't have to do this. We'll find another way. But Ethan shook his head. We don't have time for another way. He turned back to the figure. What do I have to do? The ritual was simple but excruciating. Ethan placed the crystal bloom into a socket on the pedestal, and the artifact's energy surged into him like a tidal wave. Pain tore through his body as the energy coursed through him, burning away every trace of his old self. Lyra screamed his name, but he couldn't respond. His vision blurred, his senses overwhelmed. The artifact's light grew brighter, engulfing the chamber in a blinding glow. When it was over, Ethan collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. The artifact was gone, its energy absorbed into him. The chamber was silent, the oppressive hum replaced by a deep, calming stillness. He looked down at his hands, which now glowed faintly with the same energy that had once filled the artifact. He could feel the forest's heartbeat, the life of the planet pulsing through him. You are now its guardian, the figure said, its voice softer. Protect it well. Ethan and Lyra emerged from the temple to find the village in chaos. The ground trembled, and the glowing trees flickered like dying embers. The villagers ran in panic, their fear palpable. Villara stood in the center of the chaos, her staff blazing with desperate energy. When she saw Ethan, her eyes widened in fury. "What have you done?" she screamed. Ethan stepped forward, his new energy radiating around him. "I ended this. Your control is over." Vilara raised her staff, but the power she unleashed fizzled against Ethan's newfound connection to the planet. She screamed in frustration as the villagers turned to him, their fear shifting to awe.